Hello, everyone. Welcome to Libraries in Response, session 134 in our series. Since, of course, we began in March of 2020 with the pandemic in response to the crisis that was the health crisis. And it has just rolled on since then. It's been, you know, we thought it was kind of a momentary thing, but then there was just one crisis after another. There was the social crisis just within a month or two of the pandemic being declared from the Floyd murder. Then there was the economic crisis from the pandemic. And there was a political crisis, and then there's always the climate crisis, which we might now call a climate catastrophe. But to keep it in the crisis category, we'll leave it for there now. And then AI has arrived as the latest challenge to our set ways. And it is a kind of a crisis because it seems to have major impact, even as we may not agree what that actually is. We know it's not nothing. We know it's actually pretty substantial. And even if we just go by the people who are investing money in it, to the level that we were seeing with these incredible server farms, these massive things that absorb huge amounts of energy, space, and water. Um, it's distorting the financial markets even. That's just aside from whatever the technology itself may be doing, which is basically what we've been focusing on. It's been our most popular topic since we started. We've done maybe 15 AI specific sessions, and this is another one. So, generative AI and the library collection, risks, realities, and responses. My name is Don Means. I'm the director of the Gigabit Libraries Network, and this is our production, co-hosted and co-produced by IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, based in The Hague, longtime partner with GLN, working on equity and access for the internet. We think every community should have an access point, and that this is something that libraries can do. There are roughly 400,000 public libraries in the world. They should all be connected. They should all have robust connections as a minimum standard, a minimum platform for access, not to mention the staffing, the support. Our speaker today, Nick Tanzi, who's back with us again to get into this specific application of AI. We'll get to Nick. But we do want to thank our supporters and sponsors, the New Jersey, Washington, Texas, and Delaware state libraries, as well as Mission Telecom, whose incredibly valuable support, financial support, helps keeping us on the, what do we call this, the air? I don't know if we call it on the air, online? Okay. Well, anyway, we thank them. This is our go-to circumstance. We're all in this together. There's no one that's not in this picture. There's no one that's not under some kind of pressure or threat from these crises. And so the libraries are there to respond. It's, what they do. People need them. And these, of course, are the global crises, but crisis comes at every level, from global to personal, and libraries respond to that amazingly, our wonderful institutions. This is our metaphor. We'd like to just implant this in people's minds to try to make the case for the value of libraries. There are like two things that we attempt, we as a Gigabit Libraries Network. One is we want to encourage libraries and librarians to be more assertive, to to step outside of their traditional way of waiting to be asked, and in some cases, and like we think AI is one of those cases, offering to help proactively. The other side of that is the general condition. While libraries are very popular, they're also incredibly taken for granted. And we just think that's completely uncalled for and unacceptable. So promoting the awareness of libraries on one side and advocating for librarians to be more assertive. I'm still looking for another word. It doesn't sound like aggressive, I hope, but it means stepping forward. Tomorrow, this is a little happy news. It's not really AI related, not even necessarily library related, but it's happening tomorrow. And this is the interstellar object is passing through the solar system. And tomorrow it will come within 30 million kilometers of Mars, which is really close in astronomical terms. And so all the instruments, all the satellites that have been around Mars looking at the planet, assessing it, are able to turn towards this object, which is moving very fast through the solar system, as well as we have, of course, the instruments on Earth, getting a look at it, trying to understand what's the nature of this object, where does it come from, how long has it been out there, and interstellar space is, you can just say the word, but man, it does not convey the magnitude of the distances and the time that are involved. And they don't know. This thing could be billions of years old, just barreling through space, passing through star systems, being pulled this way and that way as they move along. So it's fascinating for some of us, and I think it's a testament to science and technology that we can do this. So tomorrow we'll have a close look, and then there'll be another one as it passes close to the Jupiter probe, JUICE, on next month. So keep an eye on that. That's good. Today, though, we've got good news from BEAD. Now, Congress is open, actually. The government is closed, but BEAD is not closed. It has a separate condition that allows the BEAD program, which is the Broadband Equity and Access Development Program, to continue. And there's been years of work on that. It's very solid. We are total supporters of this. And so I'm sure most of you are aware of it, maybe involved, hopefully, and it should benefit everyone in the country. So as I was saying, libraries are always, ready to help, but almost never they ask. I mean, you walk into a library, they don't ask you if they can help you. They just wait for you to ask them. And then they'll do pretty much anything, help you with almost any kind of question. So that's great, but at this particular moment, it seems like there's more to do. And the reason we think that is because of special relationship between the institution of the library and this invention, this continuing invention of AI. It seems like to us there's a unique match there with these two, we can call them information technologies, and how they evolve together and what the library's role is and will be is, we think, different than others. It's not just, like a hospital. Okay, how's AI going to affect your business or any kind of enterprise? It's a special thing with libraries, and we're drilling into that to find out what those are and use that to make the case that librarians have a special opportunity, if not responsibility, to step forward and insert themselves into this conversation. We're all intimidated by these inventions because they start out the creations of engineers and technologists. And so most of us, most of us are just kind of, well, I don't know what sounds interesting, but what is it? So at some point, very much like the World Wide Web, it starts to permeate and become sort of regularized. And we start to say, oh, okay, I can do that with that. I don't know actually it works, but I can see how I can make it work. So like a car, I don't know how to make a car, but I have opinions about what car I want. I have opinions about what kind of rules of the road. So there are a lot of layers to this, and I think we're entering that kind of next stage where everybody will have a voice if they want to. So why a library? Well, these are the reasons that are being put forward by a group called the Public AI Infrastructure, and they have an idea that we should not just leave this technology, the creation of it, the shaping of it, the guidance of it, the monitoring of it, to the commercial enterprises that are building it, because they just don't have the greatest common good as their driving purpose. They're corporations, and they have obligations to optimize the corporate priorities when it comes down to it. So this is an idea that there should be a public option, as we've talked about, like with healthcare, or libraries is a great example of a public service, that we don't really want that just to be a private thing. And so this is what they're saying about that, and we think that's right. Um, they're also looking for libraries to participate. They've started a project in Utah with the state library and also working with the New Jersey State Library to actually deliver services at hubs in the library. That's what their idea is, that the library could be a great location for accessing a public AI. So there's that link at the bottom. I'll put that in the chat and suggest you check it out. So here's just a couple of quotes I thought to finish here. We don't fear it's taking over. We're not in control of how it grows. We fear not being in control. Well, yeah, okay, I'm on that boat. It's not enough for machines to be intelligent. We must ensure they're aligned with human values. Now, this is a big one here by Stuart Russell, famous computer scientist. How do we do that alignment when increasingly these machines demonstrate agency, autonomy? Well, what's the driving force of those actions? It gets more obscure as you go down and down the layers of the onion. Libraries are uniquely positioned to lead AI's ethical and human-centered integration into communities. Michael Hannigan is going to be our speaker at the end of this month. He's got a book coming out. He's got a lot to say. Look for that. So enough of that, enough of me. And now we'll turn to Nick. And Nick, as I mentioned, has been a guest before and has offered to come back and share with us some insights on the application to collections, which is, you'll learn momentarily if you don't already know, is a major topic. The implications on collections, it just sounds like a routine action, but it is complicated. So Nick, welcome back. Please tell us what is what as far as AI and collections.
Okay, thank you so much for the introduction. Let me just get a little settled here. There we go. I hope everybody's doing well. I actually gave Don a little bit of background, which is we had a major internet outage in my area right now. So I have relocated to the server room where we are squirreling away what little internet we have. And if I'm shouty, it's because I'm talking over some fans, although apparently that fades into the background. So hopefully you're not experiencing that today. So I hope everybody's faring better than me. Let's get into it. When we talk about the impact of generative AI on library collections, you will hear the term AI slop. And I think it's important to kind of define what that means. What is AI slop? Um, it refers to low quality, formulaic, and often inaccurate content. We're talking generative AI, so text, images, video, that type of media, generated by AI with minimal human oversight or effort. Um, it tends to be a feature of both the quality, which is low, and the output, which tends to be voluminous. You tend to get a lot of it, and it's not very good. Thus the term slop. I want to point out that not everything that is AI generated is necessarily slop. And that's an important distinction, especially as we talk about how we might regulate it, what its place is or isn't within the library collection. Now, we've seen AI slop seeping into online marketplaces. If you're going to do bad, you tend to go where you can do the most bad, or if you tend to try to make money, you go where you can make the most money. So when you're designing a virus, you know that viruses are typically designed for Windows operating system. It's a bigger marketplace. When you want to sell something, Amazon is commonly a place you will go, especially if that thing is an ebook, for example. It's just a large marketplace. It scales up. And so Amazon is where we first kind of started seeing a lot of this AI slop making its appearance, at least with respect to publishing. It's also sometimes an attraction to self-publishing that has had an uncomfortable relationship with it. It can be an enhancement for them, a way to get their stuff out there and get it done more affordably, but it also casts aspersions on that industry when the quality is low. Where we've seen this first kind of appearing is oftentimes when there's a popular book, there'll be an AI either summation or lookalike. You remember kind of the mockbusters that used to appear when a popular movie would come out? If you'd have Jurassic Park, you would have Cretaceous Park, which was like the $5 budget version of that movie. It was trying to grab some of that market. When a popular book comes out, it is not uncommon to have an AI generated summation of that novel for sale, or a copy of a book that is very similar in title and content, subject matter. And sometimes this will surface as the next related search result when you're looking for a thing. AI generated content oftentimes will jump onto high interest, current events, hot button topics. If there's a political assassination, the next day we will see an AI generated book about that. Now, before all the facts are out there, before really a thoughtful human authored take on events will happen, AI generated content will step into that void. So that's where it's most commonly happening. And where we first saw this taking place really was these online marketplaces that scale quite large, Amazon by way of example. Amazon has gotten to the point where they've even started putting on, trying to get disclosures from AI generated content, but oftentimes these are bad actors and don't abide by that rule. They've tried to limit how many books can be published in a day. If you can imagine, at one point they had a limit of 3 books per day. That's obviously targeting AI, and maybe the only human affected by that would be like James Patterson. It wasn't long before this AI slop began to find its way into the public library and libraries of all types, really. 404 Media has done some really excellent exposés on AI generated content with respect to libraries. Where we have seen this in particular is that we are now digital, right? Our circulation is driven by ebooks in part. Many of us are approaching that 50% print, 50% digital. And online is the vector that AI slop tends to take because it's a digital creation and it goes right to these digital marketplaces. 95% of public libraries in North America use Overdrive or Libby to provide ebooks, and many of us use services like Hoopla. And we don't go through the same material selection process oftentimes. Sometimes we're not individually purchasing titles. Sometimes we're purchasing access to a larger collection, as is the case in Hoopla, for example. And these are pre-curated collections that sometimes the quality assurance isn't there, or sometimes they're just overwhelmed by the AI slop and it finds its way into collections. 404 Media was noticing some thousands of AI-generated titles that were appearing into library collections, oftentimes via Hoopla or Overdrive. This also includes low-quality audiobooks. So the original content is human authored, the written word, but then the narration, the audiobook, was a low-quality AI narration. That is also quite common now. Again, I want to point out that just because it's AI generated doesn't make it slop. You may still not like it, but slop refers to the low quality and in particular kind of the voluminous output. But there are plenty of books, as I mentioned. This is common with audiobooks where there is a human authored book, but an AI narrator behind it. Apple is actively, I wouldn't say pushing, but they're offering, especially indie authors, especially self-published authors, the ability to use high quality AI narration to produce an audiobook. So in those cases, it's not necessarily slop, but you may feel a little bit icky about it. AI narration has come a long ways. Project Gutenberg, for example, these are all public domain books. They are actively creating an open audiobook collection that is high quality AI narration of books. And this can be an incredibly accessible option. Most books don't get an audiobook. It can be quite expensive to produce an audiobook. That often puts it out of the range of an independent author, a small press, a niche audience book. So this can be an accessible option. We also have to understand that as well. And AI generated books are commonly summations of popular books. I grew up at a time when, for example, the Cliff's Notes were quite popular. A summation of a book isn't necessarily the highest creative human endeavor, and AI can quickly do pretty accurate summations sometimes. So not every AI-generated piece is necessarily slop, and that needs to be clear. The other thing to grapple with is, what does it mean to be human authored? What does it mean to be AI generated? Where is the dividing line? There's plenty of AI spell checkers, Grammarly, for example. And I think most people wouldn't say that's AI generated, that's still human authored, but all of us probably have some dividing line between AI assisted and AI authored. And that's one of those quick, kind of messy things that we're all grappling with, I think, at this time. There is cause concern, though, with respect to AI generated materials in the library. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to start with a story. Me and my daughter, we like to watch movie trailers, especially Marvel, Disney, those types of that content. And my daughter came to me one day, she's 10 years old, and she was quite upset that she felt like she was wasting her time. She was looking for the next movie she wanted to see, oftentimes a sequel. And so imagine she's looking for Moana 3, and she kept getting AI generated trailers. And she was getting mad because they were deceiving her. And she said, how do I even know what's real? Because they're high quality oftentimes. And what we settled on was, you have to go to your trusted source. So if you're looking for the new Marvel movie, go to Marvel's YouTube channel. Don't just search. If you're looking for the new Moana movie, go to Disney Pixar's YouTube channel and go to the source, because that's the last thing you have. The last kind of measure of trust is trusted sources. And libraries, we position ourselves as that trusted source of information. So anything that can degrade the quality or deceive the user that makes its way into our collection is a threat to the library's business model. Inaccurate information, when AI hallucinates, when it makes stuff up that's not true or nonsensical, that isn't just an inconvenience, that can be dangerous. When a patron, for example, is seeking medical information, we can see that the stakes are different in that scenario. By way of example, going back to Amazon, They had to pull a bunch of books that were on foraging, that were on a field guide to mushrooms, that were AI generated, because they offered dangerous advice, false advice. Things like, you can tell if a mushroom is safe to eat by its smell. That's not true. Um, so you could see where there is real harm in kind of AI slop. It also has the habit of, if I go to Hoopla, if I go to Overdrive, and I encounter tons and tons of AI generated content that surfaces quite high in my search, that poor content hides my otherwise good content. And it's a poor reflection on the collection. You shouldn't have to wade through filth to get to what you want to get to, right? And so slop has that way of flooding a marketplace where it's not a great shopping experience, not a great browsing experience for the end user, for the patron. Some of our models, our digital lending models, are cost per circulation models. So when somebody checks out that bad book, maybe wastes a few minutes, realizes it's not what they want, it costs the library money at a time when we're questioning the financial sustainability of digital lending, when we're getting squeezed on e-lending. And finally, a lot of feelings about AI and where it stands with our professional ethics. And one of those points of friction is sustainability. And I'm talking about environmental sustainability, which as of 2019 is one of the core values of the librarianship as per ALA. And generative AI is quite energy intensive. It uses quite a bit of water to cool these data centers. So we have to ask ourselves, are we contributing to a technology that is contributing to the degradation of our environment? Oftentimes, the answer with these things tends to be more training, but also policy. And this is an excellent time to review your collection development policy. New technologies always stress library policies. Earlier, Don kind of mentioned the advent of the internet. World Wide Web was 1993. You know that the internet broke many of our well-intentioned policies, and even those internet policies that we created, we had to adapt as the internet changed and evolved. So you have an emerging technology in generative AI that is going to place pressure on policy, may require new policy, but certainly requires a review, if not revision, of existing collection development policy. Within that, there's some important considerations. The first one is, what is the true intent of your policy? You need to think about that, because if it's quality assurance, then keep it couched in quality assurance. If it's just to exclude AI, don't use quality assurance as the reason. And what I mean by that is, if I treat all AI generated content as slop and I say, we're not adding it because it's low quality, we don't add low quality content. If it's high quality, if it's accurate, but it's AI generated, well, then you're caught in a bind there, right? You gave a false pretext. If your reason is to exclude it entirely because you find the technology offensive, then stick with that. But don't come up with a pretext that you're not willing to commit to. The worst kind of policy is that which you cannot actually enforce. It's unenforceable, or at least not consistently enforceable. So I would stay away from absolutist language. If you're saying we will not buy AI generated content, it has no place in the collection, understand that stuff will slip through the cracks. So it's better phrased as, we will make every effort to purchase human created content, human authored content, is probably something that's a little nearer to the truth. So be aware of that. It can be quite tricky to detect AI generated content. Separately, many of our ebook collections, in particular, our digital collections, are a shared resource. We're a part of a consortium. That is the case at my library. So when you're making collection development policy statements or drafting policy, you may have to draw a distinction between that stuff that your library actually purchases and that which is a shared resource, and at least have these conversations if you want to be more consistent within your geographic region, your zone, your consortium, whatever that is. That's a bigger conversation than just your library, perhaps. So you either have two policies, one which governs that shared collection and your own, or you need to have that conversation more broadly and then have some more expansive policy. You should consider how you'll handle patron requests. Sometimes we act like people are fooled by the AI generated content, the slop, and that is sometimes true. But sometimes people are aware that it is AI generated, but they're interested in it. They want it. And so you have to be prepared to either say yes or no when it is a patron request. Does it meet the informational needs, the recreational needs of your community? Certainly is meeting their interest if they're requesting it by name. And then, as I mentioned, we need to determine what it means to be human authored. Kind of a weird thing to say in the year 2025, but what is AI generated? What is AI assisted? Where is that dividing line? Do you require some sort of disclosure within that? What does it mean? What is human authorship to you? Because if you're using this AI label as a reason to include, exclude, label, segregate, whatever that is, you at least need to have a definition of what it means to be AI generated, AI assisted, human authored. I've been reading a lot of library policies as I draft my own. I imagine all of us are policy pirates. It's a good thing to be as a library. We share resources, and that means looking at what is the best practices. What are other libraries doing? What does it look like when the rubber meets the road? I'm especially interested in when a library revises an existing policy because it's gone through some sort of stress test. When I look at, in particular, public libraries and how they've addressed this, it tends to come in 3 or 4 flavors. That is that AI content is allowed into the collection, but it gets labeled as such so that it's clear either through the metadata, the author field, physical labeling, if it's a physical item, separate collection, but somehow you have, as the user, as the patron, clear indication that something is AI generated. Then there's that AI content is not actively sought. You're not going out of your way to include it. You're really prioritizing human created materials. But if it finds its way into the collection and you discover it, it's not automatically weeded, but that you apply your existing acquisition standards to it. And that's that final judgment. Does it stay? Does it go? And then I've seen libraries that entirely exclude AI content from the library collection. And most commonly, that is done not just as a matter of, the accuracy or how good or bad it is, but on a more ethical grounds that we are either doing this to support human creativity, and as such, we're not going to spend our money on AI generated content, or that that artificial intelligence is incompatible with the library's code of ethics or your mission statement, and thus you're entirely excluding that. I have a little QR code up here. This does link to a piece I did where I will have firm examples where you can actually kind of comparison shop some real adopted library policies that speak to generative AI materials within the collection. But that's a deeper dive, but that resource is there for you. Finally, what do I think the actual answer is? Well, I think the priority needs to be on transparency. I think we all benefit from transparency. If I want to be able to effectively include, exclude, or otherwise label AI-generated materials within a library, I need the vendor to be clear to me, the aggregator, the distributor, to tell me when it's AI generated. And everything kind of flows down because then your aggregator is going to tell you, I need transparency from the publishing house. And the publishing house would tell you, I need transparency from the author. So there's a lot of quality assurance that needs to be done, that needs to scale up. But I do believe that transparency cuts all ways, that the library should be transparent through policy about what it is or isn't adding to the collection. And as far as the library knows, needs to be transparent with their users if something is AI generated or not. Because it is a real ethical concern for many people and a values-driven decision folks are making. And we do have quite a bit of, we oftentimes, when we talk to big tech, we feel powerless because they speak the language of money and we're libraries and we're broke, right? We don't have Google money. We certainly don't have, Amazon money, but we do have quite a bit of money when we talk about conversations with library vendors. We're an important marketplace for them. And that's where we need to take a firmer stance on what our expectations are with the Libby's, with the Hooplas of the world, because we do exercise a little bit more. We have more weight to throw around in these conversations. We also have a little more weight when we work together. When we have these conversations and we get together, we speak not as an individual library, but as a consortium, as a state, as an industry, that definitely is a force multiplier for us. But I do think we have to take a firmer line and at least demand transparency so you can include, exclude, do whatever it is you want to do as you generate, as you author policy to address this very real concern. So that's what I have for you today. Don, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I do. I do.
Okay.
Nick. Thank you. Great.
I will say too, if I'm shivering, it's because now my server room decided it's too warm in here and it's dropped it. So I'm probably in the 50s right now.
You want to get a coat?
No, I'm gonna tough it through.
Well, very heroic of you, Nick. Thank you.
The fact that I'm shivering shows you I'm human. So
There you go. I believe it. Either that or it's a cool algorithm. Uh,
yes.
let's talk more about this dividing line, this assisted versus authored, etc.
Yeah.
Uh, I heard you mention recently that the Library of Congress, of course, is responsible for copyright designations, and so they must have some dividing.
U.S. Copyright Office, rather. So a recent case, Don, actually, is somewhat of an important case study, I would say, in all this was U.S. Copyright Office actually had a graphic novel called Zarya of the Dawn that was AI generated. And the author, I use the air quotes, okay, but the creator brought it to get copyright protection. And the US Copyright Office said that human authorship is a necessary component for copyright protection. The words, I believe, were written by the author, so could be copyrightable, but the images, the illustrations were AI generated and were not. But again, there's a lot of nuance even still. What is that, human authored exactly? That one was a little black and white because the images were entirely AI generated outside of, some brief prompts that were human authored.
So you've got a mix. Obviously, this is the difficulty: is that how do you separate out a draft from a revision, from an original outline, all that kind of thing. Um, so there doesn't seem to be a good answer to that. You're saying that each library should develop its own policy of where that dividing line might be, which is going to be very difficult to enforce, especially if, and I think you make a really important point about upstream policy up to, publishers, vendors, publishers, and authors. It sounds like not only an opportunity to aggregate the market value of libraries, but also the policy of libraries, if they can then agree on a policy that then they can advocate upstream. Is that possible, or is that in the works, or what do you know?
Yeah, well, what I would say is we know, like, what is a company going to do? People oftentimes ask me to make predictions. What do you think a company is going to do? And it's quite easy. They're going to make money. They're going to do the thing that makes them a lot of money, and they're going to do or not do the things that cost them money. So we have to make it more of a financial calculus for those folks we work with, right? And that means taking a hard line sometimes. And yes, by scaling up, I think those conversations carry more weight, right? If you're a library vendor and a bunch of libraries will not buy stuff if they can't easily identify AI generated content, well, now you're making a business decision where the calculus has changed. Oftentimes too, when we talk about what does it mean to be human authored, all these things, with library policy with respect to emerging technologies, policies often begin with a couple of definitions where how are you defining generative AI? How are you defining AI generated? How are you defining human authored? So you can put those at the beginning of a policy by way of explanation. So at least we understand, rather than use a term that means something different to everybody.
Exactly. So when you say you can, you don't mean me, and you don't mean an individual library. You mean a lot of libraries. You mean enough libraries that would affect a decision by a publisher or a market maker to impose those definitions. Is anybody creating those definitions and then advocating them?
Yeah, I think it's very much a work in progress. And that's where being early, sometimes we talk about early adopters. If you're an early regulator, if you're somebody who's building guardrails, you actually can wield outsized influence because everybody's looking to see who's first to the party and who's taking a good faith attempt at regulation, right? So you are able to affect more change early on. That's why I think you see such an intensity of debates around generative AI, and it's perfectly natural. People of different interests and ideas and thoughts on the technology recognize the importance of getting out there early and trying to build that critical mass, trying to shape the future, really define the relationship between libraries and this technology. Uh, so if you're interested, if you're concerned, be early to the table because listen, libraries right now are comparison shopping policies and trying to find something that's a good fit that speaks to their values.
Great point. So who's hosting that table? Is it ALA? Is it Urban Library Council? Is it
Well, I think
different?
a lot of these conversations are all happening separately. But again, I will talk about us being policy pirates. When I have to write a new policy, the first thing I'm doing is looking for similar libraries. Are you in New York State? Are you a public library? And then seeing how you might have how you might have addressed this emerging technology.
Uh-huh. That's an interesting point. The state seems to be a reasonable plateau for policy. There are a lot of state policies, of course, and that are being generated now around AI, since there are very few, if any, policies coming from the federal government. It's just too big, too complicated, and all kinds of reasons. But the state levels, we're seeing action taken by the states. Of course, there's pushback on doing that at the federal level, but it still seems like a logical place to begin to build a consortium of policy interests.
The state level is oftentimes a good place because especially when we talk about generative AI and the privacy concerns, for example, um, you know, states tend to have like that's kind of the level where it begins. Like you have state privacy laws, or libraries oftentimes have a set of regulations that come from the state. So that is a good place to scale up to. And we're seeing that even with ebooks more broadly as we're trying to get more fair licensing terms. It's coming at the state level. Maryland took a shot at it. Connecticut recently passed legislation. New York's got some stuff that's hopefully going to get up to the governor. So I think state is a good place to scale at.
Okay.
If you're a business and you can't, you have certain regulations about what you can and can't sell, what people are willing to buy at the state level, that I think definitely captures your attention.
Yeah. There's also the flip side of the market that the state itself represents a market category for most providers. Most vendors have, sort of state assignments of how they're doing business. So that's really interesting. Um, your recommendation for your daughter caught my attention. I mean, it's we're but AI slop. I mean, there's spam slop, just a swamp of generated fake offerings that are just hitting us all over the. And that's the same approach I think to take. If you get an email saying, your credit card is expired, you need to update it. Go to the source. Don't reply to the email. Go directly to the source and check it out. If it's important, you'll find it there. But if you respond to email, which we want to trust these from certain sources, it's just increasingly hazardous to do that. So I think that's good advice, to go to the source. Anyone have any questions for Nick? We've got quite a few people here, and I can't imagine they're not curious about some of this. So raise a hand or just chime in. You're not prohibited from unmuting and speaking. No curious people today. Sean, you must have a question. You've always got questions. Mike Bushman, has this topic come up and at the Washington State level? Have you talked about how to manage this AI slop?
Yeah, I thought Nick did a great job of hitting what everybody's facing, and the solutions aren't clear. One of the things I've been looking at, though, is I think in the scholarly publishing world, the threats that Nick talked about, how do the publishers care? How do we get Overdrive to care? Things like that. In the scholarly publishing world, author journaling, the threat is right in their face, because they have to figure out, if they're accepting papers on what kind of use of AI, they're developing taxonomies, and authors have been kind of afraid that they're using it, but do I disclose that I'm using it? Will my paper get not published if I disclose I'm using it? So those things are going on. Like, that's the hot spot right now, I think, for this, and there might be some goodness that comes out of that.
Yeah, I do want to point out that, sometimes we think like the aggregator is like complicit in it, and they view it as a problem. Like, it's not making Amazon happy when authors are yelling at them that copy type books are popping up, and and it's just the scale of the problem is quite big. And so when you're Amazon and you're playing whack-a-mole with AI generated content, you can see that it's nobody's having a great day with it outside of those folks who are maybe generating the spam and making a little bit of money on it. But I think overwhelmingly everyone views it as a problem. And then, yeah, that sense of what is human authorship is always sticky. I'm somebody who loves M dashes, and I'm always like, man, it's like, do I have to stop using them? Because then you have a question of, is this authentically Nick or not? With email and the rise of the internet, we had to figure out email etiquette. And I think you have to figure out AI etiquette and what is that appropriateness of using or not. And as you mentioned, Mike, just even disclosure. What does AI disclosure look like? When is it appropriate or not? And those ground rules are being built in real time.
Here's an interesting comment from Fred Hall. I'm learning that we still have to interrogate the AI product to see if it says what we want it to say. Fred, are you talking about the actual AI tool or the content that you suspect may be AI generated?
Well, what I was thinking was in terms of the AI content. I was just going to send something where I've been dabbling with ChatGPT, Gemini, and a couple of other AI tools, and what I've been trying to do was the content that comes out of those tools when we make my inputs, the contents that come out of those tools. Learning from others, I've learned that I needed to interrogate the content to make sure that it does say what I want it to say or what I intend for it to say.
Good. Ask it. I mean, how we apply these judgments is a tricky question, and testing it, having a a standard or a mechanism, a method for interrogating content is really an interesting approach.
Well, what I'm also learning because I'm you know reading up on a lot of stuff. You hear from Mark Cuban and the different other folks as far as some of that one element um, as far as AI can generate the content, can produce the content, but in terms of critical thinking, that is still at this stage that is still a human function. We still have to apply the critical thinking when it comes to reviewing the content, when it comes to looking over the content that we generate, um, again, to make sure that it does say what we intend for it to say.
And Don, just to piggyback a little bit on what Fred's saying as well, listen, just because a library is adding something to the collection has never meant that we endorse that opinion or any of that. But it does give a stamp of there was some quality assurance, right? That there was
Another
part
word,
of the
yeah.
acquisition, it met our, acquisition standards. And in the digital age, that's not necessarily true when you're buying access to a larger collection that we did not curate. And so that's a dangerous spot where you can lose user trust.
Yeah, because they're not.
Because we always want to say, when you want to know something, come to the library. And then all of a sudden, we have an erosion of our standards. We have to be very, very careful. So again, I'm not ever going to be one to say that anything AI generated is terrible. The quality can go up, it can come down. Sometimes I don't like it replacing a human creative endeavor, but I don't view a summation of a book as like Cliff's Notes is not a creative human endeavor for me. So I have mixed feelings about the type of content, but certainly you don't want garbage that's just riddled with error or, circular sentences and wild inaccuracies if it can be avoided.
Yeah, but it's still something of I guess what I'm hearing is something of a, for lack of a better term, something of a tightrope that we're walking with regards to all that. Yeah.
Yeah, the patrons are not going to hold the publishing house responsible, or the aggregator. Hoopla has come up in a couple of comments here as a platform that fits that bill.
Yeah, I would say too, Don, Hoopla has responded, particularly after the 404 Media article, and they are doing more screening, although I feel like, and this is an assumption by me, that they're probably using an AI screening tool to try to detect AI generated content. But they are more actively trying to screen this stuff out. And I know libraries have gotten more responsive about trying to report this stuff to be removed. Library Futures, I know, is actively trying to have a submission form where you can, if you see it, just to report it, not so much to get rid of it, but to try to understand the scope and scale of the problem.
Yeah, I think it's an example of your step forward early on the policy part. Don't just wait for the publishers to decide. Step in and offer them your perspective on what their policies should be or might be.
Yeah, and everybody is floating trial balloons to see, what they can get away with. And I think it's important to early on be like, that is not okay, what that thing that you're doing, and not to contribute to the problem. If you have a vendor that's not meeting your needs or is contributing to a problem, money is the most powerful motivator you have when you're working with a business. And I
Right?
want to say in fairness, if it was easy, they'd have done it already. It's very difficult, when you're facing a deluge of content, but then your aggregator has to play hardball with the publisher, right? And the publisher has to get better with their screening process with their individual authors.
Well, it's that screening process, which I think that the publishers could benefit from more front end perspectives and experiences, as opposed to Dave Hornbeck is reporting their board is considering excluding all AI content from their collections without clearly specifying how to determine its penetration. That seems like a kind of a cop-out policy. You can declare it, but you can't define it. So, good luck with that, Dave.
Yeah,
We've had
I think it's really, and I don't begrudge any library by the take they take with this. It's more, what is it predicated? What is that decision predicated on? If it's predicated on quality assurance, then if somebody comes to you and says, hey, this was actually a really well authored again in quotations, but AI generated, book or other media, what then is your pretext for excluding it if it was couched in quality assurance? If it's just, again, you have an objection to the technology and its place in the library, then yeah, then that makes sense to have a one size fits all. Other than you then have to define AI assisted, I think still
other than that,
versus
yeah.
AI authored.
Well, it's a dilemma, but that curation process is absolutely what people rely on from their libraries. And slop comes in straight print as well.
Yes, it does. And then, like hopefully, like we have collection development standards. Sometimes they are circumvented by a patron request. We know this. Somebody really wants the book, and maybe it's not the best received book, but you get it because there's interest behind it. And do you upend that rule if it's AI generated? It's a question.
Yeah. I mean, we still haven't really nailed down what constitutes AI generated. We can say if it's 100% AI, okay, but any of the hybrid assisted ratios really make that difficult.
Yeah, somebody pointed out that like accurate labeling of materials would help in that choice. Well, absolutely. That's why I think I don't think it's much of an ask to say just be transparent about the
Yeah.
authorship, right? The provenance of the thing you're trying to sell me. Because then I can make an informed decision, whatever that decision is. And then the end user can make an informed decision about whether they want that piece, knowing it's AI generated or not.
And that's after the library has made a judgment on the quality, whatever the creative
Yeah.
mechanism.
And beyond books, we always make value-driven decisions. I mean, there's a market for like cage-free eggs, right? Because that was important to somebody to pay a little bit more money to support what they felt was an ethical choice, right? So it may cost a little more money for human authored materials, right? But that's a values-driven decision we're making, or not, again.
Exactly so. Well, we're coming up on the hour, Nick. Would you like to make a closing statement for us today? This has been a great session.
Yeah, I would just say, I'm sorry, Don. No, it probably feels like the Wild West, and it's because it is. And some of the earliest work our libraries need to do is build what guardrails we can, right? Is to help people navigate disruption. And so collection development policy is going to be a part of that because that's central to the library's business model. And so you should be thoughtful. You should have these disagreements and kind of figure out what it is you're hoping to achieve and start building those guardrails that I think are really going to serve us going forward. And at this stage are especially important because when you're early to the table with these policies, you'll have a lot of eyes on them as people, take them and adapt. So I would say rush it to the market. We don't want to do that, but be thoughtful and be deliberate. And I would say this is something you probably need sooner rather than later, whether it's a new policy or it's simply, reviewing your existing policy and making sure it still serves your needs.
Great. And take a seat at that table. Step up and pull out a chair and say, this is really important and it's growing more important. And we've got things to add to this conversation. One of the things that can help you do that is to work with the technology. it'll give you a much better understanding of how these things can be used and misused that will help you develop your own opinions about it and what it means to your library and the world at large. So, Nick, thank you so much again for being with us. This has just been great content. I I hope everybody has a chance to go back. The recording will be up in a few days. And I think I missed somebody's hand that was raised, so sorry about that. But thank you, everybody. This has been great. And so we will stop the recording